The final ever episode of Stranger Things has just been released, and there's a lot to unpack here. With so many revelations, such as the Mind Flayer returning, us getting one character death that felt a little bit underwhelming, but also potentially a second, depending on how you interpret it, and also a 45-minute epilogue that could have definitely been shortened. What did that ending that Mike told us truly mean? Well, let's dive into it and break down all of the biggest questions surrounding the finale. Here is the Stranger Things Season 5 finale ending explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Did Eleven actually die? One of the main questions following the ending of the show was, did Eleven actually die? And to be honest, we were led to believe that she did, but the Duffer Brothers then did the biggest cop-out that they could have possibly done and left it down to us to decide. With the group being successful in killing both Vecna and the Mind Flayer because they were connected together due to the hive mind, and it being revealed that the Mind Flayer actually needed Henry and didn't treat him as a vessel. This led the group to escape from the abyss and for them to set off the bomb by the exotic matter so that the Upside Down could be destroyed. As the group made it back to the right side up, Eleven was still in the Upside Down, standing by the gateway, and we saw that she wasn't prepared to walk through into the right side up because, like Carly said, she knew that there would always be others like Dr. Brenner and Dr. K that would hurt her friends in order to get to her so that they could make more numbers. So instead, she stayed behind whilst the Upside Down was destroyed, leading us to believe that she was a goner for good. However, what we saw right at the end of the final episode, 18 months later, was that Mike told an alternative story after playing Dungeons & Dragons, where the mage, which was Eleven, actually tricked everybody with the use of Carly's powers and made it seem like she was taken out with the Upside Down. But in reality, it was just Carly utilizing her powers, and instead, Eleven went off to find peace in a paradise somewhere far away. This was something that was technically told to us by Mike the storyteller, and it also connected back to what Hopper said about how there were two different roads of life that Mike could follow. The one where he blamed himself for Eleven's death, or the one where he accepted her choice and moved on. I think this is just simply the storyteller trying to provide alternative ways that people could be at peace with the decision that Eleven made. In my mind, Carly was long dead before Eleven even got anywhere near the gateway of the Upside Down to leave, and also before she even entered the abyss. So I'm firmly on the side of Eleven being killed within the show and her not living in this paradise somewhere else. Eleven's paradise was with the people that she cared about most. That was the whole point of the show. The fact that she was treated terribly throughout her life until she met the likes of Hopper, Mike, and the group of friends that made her feel accepted. So I think Eleven did actually die. The timeline of events simply wouldn't make sense for her to survive. Vecna's death and his connection to the Mind Flayer. When it came to Vecna's death, we finally saw why it was that he wasn't able to step foot in the cave, and it was because the Mind Flayer was restricting him from going in there. However, as we saw, he forced himself into that specific memory that he had where he was exposed to the Mind Flayer for the first time. Ultimately, I feel like my biggest fear happened, and Henry opening the case and having the darkness within him was basically an advertisement for the stage play The First Shadow, as we didn't learn that much about it. Henry had that menacing, evil look in his eye that I was craving from Season 4, and whilst Will was connected to Henry through the hive mind and restricting him from fighting with Eleven, he tried to convince him that Henry was once like him, a vessel. But Henry responded and said how the Mind Flayer needed him. I don't think that's the case. I think that just showed the weakness in Henry's mind and that the Mind Flayer made him believe that, as after all, the scientist in the cave told Henry to resist it because it would consume him and also consume everything. It was here where the lair that Vecna was in was revealed to be the shell of the Mind Flayer that was lying dormant, and it awoke, which led to the group to fighting it off whilst in the abyss. Vecna was essentially connected to it right underneath the heart, and as Eleven was fighting him up close and Will was also interfering and stopping him from attacking Eleven, it led him to be pierced by a spike inside of the core of the Mind Flayer. Personally, I thought every single battle in Season 4 was better than this, and it didn't convey the true strength of Vecna. I feel he was killed way too easily and way too quickly. I also thought that considering the Mind Flayer was brought back for the first time in several seasons, it was also taken out way too easily too. I much preferred it when it was this shadowy entity rather than this physical being that was chasing after them. Don't get me wrong, when it opened its mouth it was absolutely menacing, but I didn't really feel like there was ever really a threat at any point, to be honest. I feel like it never really even came close to taking any of them out. Joyce was the person that ultimately killed Vecna by telling him that he picked on the wrong family, and as she was bludgeoning him, we saw clips of all of the wrong that had come at the hands of him, but once he was taken out and the heart of the Mind Flayer was blackened, the reign of terror was no more. Personally, I don't know if Joyce needed this moment. She was barely in the finale and she got arguably one of the biggest moments in the entire show, so I don't know if it was quite deserved. What happened to the characters in the end? During the epilogue at the end of the episode, we found out that Hopper and Joyce got engaged to one another, and that they were going to be moving far away so he could accept a new position in the place. Will moved away and found a place where he felt he could truly be himself and be accepted. Mike became a writer. Dustin continued to study and have his interest in continuing to learn, but made time for adventures. Lucas and Max ended up with one another and settled down. Steve became a baseball coach. Jonathan was continuing to make films. Robin was working at the radio. And Nancy dropped out of Emerson and took a job at the Herald. However, they all agreed that they'd meet up once a month because their friendship was something that was irreplaceable. Whilst the main group's future was only in theory, I feel like the show was insinuating that that was the pathway that they were all going to go down. We also saw that Holly, Derek, and the other members of her class were now in the basement playing Dungeons & Dragons, showing that they were now the generation that were going to have an appetite for adventure. This is because Mike and the group had laid down their Dungeons & Dragons binders for the final time. My review of the final episode. I think this is a finale where I did kind of like elements of it, but I also didn't like elements as well. I thought it was super choppy, the CGI looked pretty poor at points, and it made Vecna and the Mind Flayer feel half as threatening as what they'd been for the entirety of the show. The Mind Flayer was this entity that basically started it all, gave Henry Creel the darkness that caused him to become the evil human that he was, and it just felt like they were wiped out so easily. There was so much more time left in the episode once they were wiped out, and I thought something else was going to happen, but that was literally it. I thought it was a bit of a shame. As I said earlier, every battle that Vecna was involved in during Season 4 was far better than Season 5. Even when he appeared in Season 5 Volume 1 in Episode 4, he was far more menacing than what he was in the finale. It just felt like there wasn't as much emotion involved, and it just felt like 11 had the upper hand from the off, when in reality they were in the Mind Flayer's playground. Vecna and the Mind Flayer were connected, so surely he should be more powerful than ever. When it came to the characters' deaths, 11 was a big one until they basically left it up to interpretation on if she actually died or not, so I thought that was a bit of a weak move from the showrunners. Carly's death didn't really impact me in the slightest, and if anything, it just kind of supported the fact that the brothers brought her back because they didn't want her to be this open-ended footnote about the show from Season 2. 11's death could have basically happened without her nudging that thought into her mind. The showrunners also teased Steve's death when he almost fell off the tower, but instead Jonathan randomly held onto him and stopped him from falling, so that also felt like a bit of a weak move. Honestly, I just genuinely feel like there was too much of a story left to wrap up with only 2 hours left on the clock, and it ultimately just made that final episode feel a bit choppy. I also feel like in Volume 1 and Volume 2 we spent so much time with Holly Wheeler, and we also got the massive revelation of Will having powers, and they both just didn't actually really matter that much. Holly was barely in the finale, and Will didn't even confront Vecna face to face right at the end. I get that they communicated telepathically, and it almost showed that Will was mentally stronger than Vecna, but it just didn't really have that impactful feeling. I just kind of feel like there was nothing at stake in the finale, despite the fact that the entirety of the world was on the line and the Mind Flayer was revealed to still be in existence. It's a shame. The jeopardy just wasn't quite there and it didn't really translate through the screen. I also feel like the final 45 minutes of the episode dragged massively. This was where it was all set 18 months later and it just contained massive cliches from movies from the 1980s. I feel like this was also where the poor acting quality in some of the cast members was exposed. I didn't actually think Finn Wolfhard did that great of a job in the finale, especially in the scene with 11. I think it just highlighted how the show was actually far stronger when they were just that little bit younger. The flashback scenes brought that to light too. Even though I've said a lot of bad things about the finale, there were moments that I did love. I thought the Hopper and 11 connection was strong, and I felt the emotion that he had for 11. I was also excited when Henry went into the cave and we were learning about his connection to the Mind Flayer, and then the Mind Flayer revealed itself in the abyss. That did actually get me really excited. I just feel it's a bit disappointing with the outcome that it had. Overall, I think the show ended okay. I think season 4 is comfortably the best season of the show, and I do genuinely believe that if they didn't leave it 3.5 years, we could have got a finale that was more in line with what we had then. It was just so dark, and it had the horror that made the show what it was originally known for right at its core. Henry Creel and Vecna felt terrifying back then, but in this season, I wasn't really frightened at all. There were just no stakes in this season, and not at any point did I feel like the main group weren't going to win, so there was no jeopardy. When it ultimately comes down to how Stranger Things will be remembered, I think it will be remembered well. It didn't tank the finale, I just don't think it had the time to be able to execute the ending that the story deserved and what we also deserved. It almost needed an entire volume to expand on the abyss, the Mind Flayer's return, and for a battle between Vecna and Eleven, not just a quick 20 minutes in the finale. It was just a bit rushed when it came down to it, which is mad to say in an episode that was 2 hours and 8 minutes long. Just cut the 45-minute epilogue in my opinion. It's a shame, but it's not easy work writing an ending, as we've seen with many other shows before, and whilst not perfect, the ending to Stranger Things was just okay. So, there you have it, the Stranger Things Season 5 finale ending explained. If you want to see more videos on Stranger Things Season 5, then check the playlist below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of the finale? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.